there comes a quiet ache in the hearts of many parents, a silent grief that words rarely touch. It begins when the child they once cradled in love begins to pull away, not just in distance, but in spirit. Moments that once shimmered with connection are replaced by indifference, silence, or even disrespect. And so many wonder, where did I go wrong? But perhaps the question isn't about blame at all. Perhaps the truth lies deeper in the way love, ego, misunderstanding, and the hunger for independence dance silently within every family. In this journey together, we won't offer easy answers. Instead, we'll walk gently through the wisdom of Zen and Buddhist teachings, exploring the tender truths behind generational pain, unspoken expectations, and the fragile beauty of interconnection. Let us look closely, not with judgment, but with compassion, for what we uncover may heal not just our families, but ourselves. The relationship between a parent and child is one of life's most sacred threads, woven not only through biology, but through sleepless nights, quiet sacrifices, and unconditional love that expects nothing, yet silently hopes for everything. From the first time a parent holds their child, there's an invisible vow to protect, to nurture, to give all that they can, even if it means emptying themselves in the process. It is a love that doesn't announce itself, yet echoes through every warm meal served, every coat offered on a cold day, every silent prayer whispered behind closed doors. For many, this bond is not only emotional, it's spiritual, almost transcendent, a reflection of something timeless. And yet, something so deeply sacred can also become the root of deep sorrow when misunderstood. As children grow, their worlds expand, and in that expansion, something strange happens. The parent, once the center of that world, becomes background noise. The love remains, but it is often taken for granted, left unspoken, or dismissed altogether. What once felt like a shared journey begins to feel like parallel paths. And for the parent who gave everything, this shift can feel like a quiet betrayal. But here is the truth. Few dare to say aloud, love, even the most sacred kind, is not immune to suffering. In fact, the deeper the love, the more tender the wound when it is unseen or unreciprocated. Yet before we rush to blame the child or pity the parent, we must first pause, because the sacredness of this bond lies not in perfection, but in its humanity, in its rawness, in the fact that both sides are learning, stumbling, growing, and trying each in their own way. From a Buddhist perspective, no relationship exists in isolation. Every moment between parent and child is shaped by karma, intention, past causes, and present choices. There is no blame, only unfolding. No enemy, only misunderstanding. When we honor the sacred bond, not just as a role, but as a spiritual practice, we begin to shift. We begin to see not just our children or our parents, but fellow beings on a path we once shared and now must honor from new distances. So before we label a child ungrateful or a parent too demanding, let us look deeper. Let us ask, where did the thread loosen? Where was silence mistaken for indifference? Where did love go unspoken? And why did we expect it to be understood without words? These are not questions of judgment, but of healing. And perhaps, by asking them with sincerity and compassion, we take the first step back toward that sacred thread. If this reflection speaks to you, take a moment to share your story in the comments below. You are not alone. On Awakening Insights, we explore not just ideas, but lived experiences. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and gently tap the bell icon so together we continue this journey of understanding, healing, and coming home to what truly matters. It's easy to look at an ungrateful child and feel a deep sting, as though love has been tossed aside like an old coat no longer needed. The pain is real, but often we mistake the symptom for the cause. Ungratefulness is rarely rooted in cruelty or malice. More often, it stems from something quieter, more insidious, a lack of awareness. In Buddhism, this is called ignorance, not in the sense of being unintelligent, but of being unaware of interbeing, the deep, sacred interconnectedness between all beings. A child who seems dismissive or indifferent may not be rejecting their parents intentionally. Instead, they may simply be unaware of how deeply they are held by invisible threads of love, sacrifice, and support. We live in a world that praises independence. Children are taught to stand on their own, to chase dreams, to forge a path free from the shadows of the past. But in doing so, they often lose sight of the soil that made their growth possible, like a young tree stretching toward the sun, unaware that its roots feed off the decaying leaves of the tree before it. Many children fail to see the quiet sacrifices that have nurtured them. They do not remember the sleepless nights, the quiet tears, the choices their parents made to put them first. Not because they are selfish, but because the world rarely teaches them to look beneath the surface. And so, they grow blind to the truth that they are not self-made, but co-created. This isn't about guilt-tripping or demanding gratitude. It's about inviting awareness. When a child sees clearly how interconnected they are with those who came before, a quiet humility can emerge. And from that humility, gratitude naturally flows. True gratitude is not forced. It arises from insight. When a person truly sees the depth of what they've received, thankfulness is no longer an obligation. It becomes a natural response of the heart. Zen teachings often use parables to gently open our eyes. Imagine the story of a wounded crane, cared for by a farmer through a long, harsh winter. When spring came, the crane flew off without looking back. Years later, it returned not to express gratitude, but to eat from the farmer's field, unaware of the hands that once fed it. When the farmer asked why, the crane simply replied, "I do not remember kindness, only hunger." It is a haunting story, not because the crane is cruel, but because it has forgotten the truth of interbeing. And in forgetting, it has lost a piece of its humanity. As we reflect on this, perhaps the question shifts. Instead of asking, "Why are they ungrateful?" we might ask, "What have they forgotten? And how can we help them remember?" Compassion begins when we realize that behind every hard heart is often just a hidden wound or a veil of unawareness. And in that space, love can begin again. Have you ever experienced this in your own life as a parent, or even as a child looking back? What helped you reconnect with those invisible threads of love? We invite you to share your story in the comments. Your voice may be the reminder someone else needs. If this message speaks to your heart, consider subscribing to Awakening Insights, liking this video, or even sharing it with someone you care about. Sometimes, the greatest healing begins with a small conversation, one seated in understanding. As children grow, so too does their sense of individuality. This is natural, even necessary. A developing self allows them to find their voice, navigate the world, and build a life of their own. But somewhere along this path, a subtle illusion takes root: the belief that they are entirely self-made, shaped only by their own efforts, untouched by the influence or sacrifices of others. This is the ego's doing. The ego whispers, "You did this. You earned it. No one else carried you here." And slowly, without malice or intent, the child begins to forget, not the facts, perhaps, but the depth of what came before. Buddhism teaches that the ego is a construct, a mental formation born from our need to define ourselves. But like any construct, it is inherently fragile. To protect itself, it builds walls. And in doing so, it separates us from those who helped build the very ground we stand on. A child may begin to see their parents not as foundational figures, but as obstacles, or outdated, or simply irrelevant to the life they now envision. Gratitude becomes an afterthought, and reverence slips away. Not because love has disappeared, but because the illusion of independence has taken its place. A Zen story tells of a polished stone lying in the sun, admiring its own smoothness. "Look at me," it said. "How perfect I am, so sleek, so radiant. This beauty is mine alone." But nearby, the river that had shaped the stone over centuries simply chuckled. "Without my waters," it said, "you would still be jagged and rough." The stone, puffed up with pride, ignored the voice. In this way, many of us forget the gentle, persistent forces that have refined us parents who endured storms, who smoothed the edges of our fears, who believed in our shine before we ever saw it ourselves. This forgetting is not limited to the young. It happens in all of us whenever ego takes the lead. When we credit only ourselves, we sever the lineage of care that brought us here. And in that severing, we lose a part of our wholeness. Buddhism reminds us that all things are interdependent. No flower blooms alone. No river carves its path without the pull of the earth. And no person becomes who they are in isolation. If you're watching this and find yourself reflecting on your own journey, perhaps as a child who once overlooked, or as a parent feeling unseen, know this awareness is the first thread of reconnection. When we begin to see past the ego's illusions, we rediscover the beauty of humility. And in that space, a new kind of gratitude can take root, not one forced by obligation, but one born from clarity. We'd love to hear your reflections. Have you ever had a moment when you realized you weren't as self-made as you thought? What helped you see the hands that shaped your path? Leave a comment below. If this message stirred something in you, support our work at Awakening Insights by liking the video or sharing it with someone you love. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel to continue walking this path of gentle wisdom together. There is a particular kind of sorrow that only parents know, a quiet ache that settles deep within, difficult to name, yet impossible to ignore. It's not just about what was said or done by their children, but what was hoped for and never received. So often, the wound is not caused by open hostility, but by absence of acknowledgement, of gratitude, of care. For many parents, their love was not transactional. They didn't give with strings attached. But still, buried beneath all the giving was a silent longing to be seen, to be appreciated, to feel that all the sacrifices meant something. And when that longing goes unmet, the pain is not superficial. It reaches into the very core of identity, of purpose, of love given without return. Parenthood is, in many ways, an act of letting go. From the moment a child is born, the process begins letting go of sleep, of time, of personal dreams, of control, and eventually of the child themselves. But letting go doesn't mean not caring. In fact, it often means caring so deeply that the release becomes its own form of grief. What many don't talk about is that even as parents pour themselves into their children, they often hold unspoken expectations. Not demands, but hopes. Hopes that their child will grow to be kind, that they will remember where they came from, that they will return, not just physically, but emotionally, that they will say, "One day, I see what you gave up for me, and I thank you." But life rarely unfolds so neatly. Children become busy, distracted, absorbed in their own survival and stories. They may not realize how much their silence costs. They may never suspect that a simple phone call, a word of appreciation, a warm gesture could mend years of quiet heartache. And yet, this is the paradox of parenting, to give everything without guarantee of return. The Buddha spoke often of attachment as the root of suffering. And though the love of a parent may be pure, it is still vulnerable to attachment to outcome, to recognition, to relationship. So what then should parents stop caring? Stop giving? Stop loving? Of course not. The wisdom of Buddhism offers an alternative, not detachment, but compassionate non-attachment. To love fully, without clinging. To give generously, without expectation. To raise a child and still let them go. It is not easy. It asks the parent to transform their pain into insight and their expectations into presence. To shift from needing acknowledgement to embodying love in its freest form. If you're a parent carrying the silent ache of unmet gratitude, you are not alone. Your pain is valid, your journey is honored, and you are seen. Share your story below. If you feel ready, others may find comfort in your words. And if you're a grown child listening to this, perhaps it's time to reach out to say thank you, to reconnect, to soften. It takes only a moment to heal years of distance. If this message resonates, we invite you to support Awakening Insights by subscribing, liking, or simply sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with being heard. The relationship between parents and children is not born in a vacuum. It is the unfolding of countless moments, choices, and impressions, what Buddhism calls karma. Karma is often misunderstood as punishment or reward. But at its essence, it is simply cause and effect. Every action, word, and intention plants a seed. And those seeds bloom according to the conditions around them. In this way, the family is not a fixed structure. It is a living garden, growing in response to what has been sown and nurtured over time. And in that garden, both parents and children are simultaneously gardeners and plants shaping and being shaped, giving and receiving, hurting and healing. Many parents, in their deep love, unknowingly plant both flowers and thorns. They offer patience, care, and sacrifice, but may also pass down fear, anger, or control without meaning to. Children, in turn, absorb both the light and the shadow. They learn not just from what is taught, but from what is felt, tensions in the room, glances unspoken, gestures repeated, and later, as they grow, they respond to those inner imprints, often without realizing why. This is not blame, It is recognition. Recognition that behind every strained relationship are seeds that were planted, some intentionally, some unconsciously, and that healing begins not with guilt, but with awareness. When a child lashes out or withdraws, we might ask what seeds were watered in their early years. What did they witness in the silent spaces between words? Likewise, when a parent feels neglected or misunderstood, they too must reflect, what patterns did I pass down unknowingly? What pain did I carry that became part of our soil? This shared responsibility is not about assigning fault. It is about reclaiming power. Because once we understand the nature of karma, we realize that we are not trapped by the past. We are participating in the creation of the future, moment by moment. Mindfulness becomes the tool for transformation. When parents become conscious of the energy they bring into the relationship, how they speak, how they listen, how they respond, they begin to plant new seeds. Seeds of compassion, patience, presence, and children, too, can choose to cultivate awareness to notice when anger is inherited, when reactions are echoes, when wounds are ancestral. In that noticing, new choices emerge. And over time, those choices begin to shift the entire emotional ecosystem of the family. This is the deep hope Buddhism offers, that no matter how complex the garden, it can be tended, that even in hardened soil, flowers can grow, but someone must begin with intention. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to reflect. What seeds are you planting today in your words, in your silences, in your presence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might offer insight to someone else walking a similar path. If you'd like to keep exploring these meaningful reflections, we invite you to subscribe to Awakening Insights, like this video, or share it with someone who might benefit. Healing is a shared journey, and every seed of wisdom you plant along the way matters. In every family, there are words left unsaid and wounds left unhealed. Sometimes it's the silence that hurts more than anything spoken. And sometimes, what wasn't meant to harm still lingers for years. In this space of distance, where misunderstanding festers and old pain quietly accumulates, there lies both danger and potential. It is where families either fracture further or begin to mend. The turning point is rarely dramatic. More often, it begins with something deceptively simple, a soft word, a listening ear, a breath before speaking. This is the power of forgiveness and mindful communication. Forgiveness, as taught in Buddhism, is not about forgetting or condoning harm. It's about releasing ourselves from the heavy chains of resentment and blame. Holding on to anger is like gripping a burning coal. It doesn't wound the one you're angry at. It scorches your own hands. Parents may carry deep hurts, disrespect from their children, neglect, or indifference. And children, too, may harbor quiet pain, feeling judged, not heard, or burdened by expectations. But within each of us lies the ability to stop the cycle, not through dramatic declarations, but through subtle presence. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it simply stops it from controlling the present. Equally vital is the way we speak and listen. Mindful communication is a practice of deep care. It asks us to speak with honesty, but also with kindness. To listen, not to respond, but to truly understand. In families, many wounds grow deeper because of what's implied, not what's said. A parent who says, "You never call," may simply be saying, "I miss you." A child who says, "You don't understand me," might be crying out, "Please see me as I am." Beneath every harsh word is often a softer longing one that got buried under fear, pride, or generational habits. When we begin to speak from that softer place, things start to shift. A father who shares his story not to guilt his child, but to show vulnerability, creates space for healing. A daughter who dares to ask, "Can we talk?" without judgment opens a doorway long closed. These moments don't require perfection. They require courage and patience. In Zen, the practice of right speech encourages us to choose words that are true, kind, and useful. But perhaps even more importantly, it invites us to speak less and listen more. Healing often begins not in speaking, but in being fully present to another's pain. Every family has threads that have frayed over time, but threads, when handled with tenderness, can be rewoven. The fabric may never look the same, but perhaps it can be stronger, more honest, more human. Sometimes, all it takes is a pause, a moment of eye contact, a willingness to say, "I'm here. I'm listening." What conversations have you been carrying in silence? What needs to be spoken or heard in your family today? Feel free to share a reflection in the comments. You never know who might see it and feel a little less alone. And if this space feels nourishing to you, you're warmly invited to join our growing community here at Awakening Insights. Every like, share, or subscription becomes a quiet ripple of awareness in someone's life. And that, in itself, is a beautiful offering. No matter how complex or strained a family relationship may feel, one truth remains quietly, undeniably present. Nothing lasts forever. In Buddhism, this truth is known as Anicca impermanence. We are all passing through life like guests at a fleeting celebration. Children grow up. Parents grow old. Conversations delayed become conversations lost. The hands we meant to hold one day slip from our reach. And yet, this is not a truth meant to sadden, it's meant to awaken. Impermanence invites us to cherish what we still have and to see time not as an endless supply, but as a precious, vanishing gift. There is something incredibly grounding about accepting impermanence. It doesn't erase the pain of the past, but it puts it in context. It reminds us that the opportunity to speak love, to offer forgiveness, to reach out with tenderness is not infinite. One day, the parent we keep meaning to call won't be there to answer. One day, the child we expect will figure it out, may have already drifted too far. Time waits for no one, but it does. For a while, offer chances. And when we begin to live with that awareness, our hearts soften, we argue less, and understand more. We stop holding on to pride and start holding on to moments. This is where the great paradox of spiritual growth enters, even though nothing lasts. Love, true love, is never lost. It may be buried under misunderstanding, wounded by silence, or stretched thin by years apart, but it remains. It is the invisible thread that runs through every act of care, every word spoken in love, every quiet hope held in a parent's chest, every childhood memory that still lingers in a grown child's heart. And when we touch that thread again, through presence, humility, and compassion, it begins to shine. Not brightly, perhaps, but warmly, gently, honestly. You may not be able to change everything, There may be things that remain unspoken or unrepaired, but you can still choose, right now, to honor what was given, to see the sacred in the mundane, to sit across from a loved one and speak with open eyes, to say thank you while there's still time, to apologize without needing to explain, to love without needing to control. In Zen, they often speak of returning to the breath, to this moment, because this moment is the only one that is real, and in it lies everything: the pain, the possibility, and the path forward. So, wherever you are on your journey as a parent, a child, or simply a human trying to heal, know this: it's never too late to soften, to see, to connect again. Even one honest moment can restore a broken thread. If you followed this reflection to the end, thank you. That in itself is a quiet act of mindfulness. If any part of this journey spoke to you, feel free to share your own story in the comments. Not for attention, but for connection. You are part of something larger here, a shared search for meaning, for healing, for peace. And if this space has offered you something of value, you're warmly invited to stay close, subscribe to Awakening Insights, share this video with someone you love, or simply carry the message forward in your heart. Let it guide your next conversation, your next breath. After all, love, when remembered, is never truly gone. At the heart of every family story lies a simple truth. We are all just trying to love and be loved in the best way we know how. Sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we speak too sharply, stay silent too long, or forget what truly matters. But healing doesn't require perfection. It begins with presence, with the courage to soften, with the willingness to see each other not through the lens of roles or resentments, but with human eyes, open and real. If anything in this reflection has touched something within you, let it linger. Let it guide your next word, your next pause, your next act of care. And remember, you don't have to walk this path alone. Here at Awakening Insights, we're creating a quiet, thoughtful space for people like you who long to live more consciously, love more deeply, and heal what still hurts. We invite you to stay, subscribe, join our growing community, and if you feel moved, share this video with someone you love. Sometimes, one honest conversation can begin where years of silence ended.